Welcome back. This is CJ Miller, and you're listening to The Spiritual Artist, and I'm back in my makeshift studio with the same painting because I want to continue on from here and talk about that with you. So many issues have come up, and I just rewatched my first video, and I want to remind you that getting in the state of presence is your first step when you enter the art studio. Being present, getting in a state of love. And I'll tell you, this morning it wasn't easy for me. I'm not feeling all energized, and I got up and I started thinking about what I was going to talk about, and I started, what is the right way to do it? What should I tell these people? All that is fear-based. And then of course I got online and I found a woman that's telling artists that they have to take a course in color theory before they paint. Well, I want to tell you something. That is great, and taking a course in color theory I do recommend as you grow, but you don't have to do any of that in order to enter the studio. You don't have to do anything but go out and buy a piece of canvas, get some paint, and start painting, and you will learn as you go. And what I found is the same story I'm telling myself. I'm trying to put up a set of video interviews here where I'm doing demonstrations and talking about painting and sharing lessons. And it's a struggle. The lights aren't working. I was trying to get the sound going up. All those things put me into a state of fear this morning. So I had to sit down and do a little warm-up painting, listening to music. And music is a great way to get into a state of presence. But you have to be careful as to what you listen to and make sure you pick music that is uplifting for you. So I wanted to talk about this painting that we started the other day, and let's talk about a couple principles that you should know. So first, I did sit here before I turned this camera on, and I thought about where I'm at with this painting. What would I do next? And I told you how each one of us will decide to start in a different area. But I wanted to share something with you because I did hear it in this interview with this woman talking about color theory. Is she was very concerned about these brown areas. And I'll tell you a great way to get around that is my mentor, once again, Virginia Cobb, would tell me that you should always be working on 3 paintings at one time. The reason you should do that is it gives drying time. And if you hit what I call a stopping point, remember I told you only take the next move if you're inspired? You only take the next move when you're inspired. So when you hit a stopping point, switch to another canvas. And that's kind of what I did with this the other day. I hit a stopping point. And today, after I came down, did a little centering, and got back into that space of love, I'm looking at it and going, okay, where would I go with this? And I want to share this with you as an artist. You're going to have a lot of different choices. There's so many different paths you can take when you see something like this. And so in this case, there's a lot of different things I was thinking about. I want to show you a little trick, a couple little tricks that you can use. If you don't want to work on 3 paintings at one time, getting something like a heat gun, a very affordable heat gun on Amazon, and I will put a scan here to show you where you can buy one. But on a heat gun like this can let you dry the layers very quickly. So yesterday when I was working on a small painting and I was working rapidly through it, by using a heat gun and drying the layers, it can avoid blending of colors that get too dark if you want to. Remember that. This is always a choice because sometimes these dark neutrals are beautiful and they give a base to your painting. So I want to recommend a heat gun. We take these on the retreats. Students love them because they can dry and work fast. So if you can't or you don't have the space to have 3 canvases lined up and jumping from one to the next, try a heat gun, okay? Second one I want to tell you about is now we talked about looking at the painting and finding areas of interest. A nice thing that you can use is a chalk. You can use a piece of chalk if you like. And this is a great learning tool where you start isolating decisions that you might want to make. And I told you earlier that I love this area here with the motion, so I can isolate it. Or I could say, oh, I like this area, and I isolate it. This gives you the opportunity also to do shading or to do line work. I'm looking at something, I want to share this with you. If you haven't watched my Asemic writing video, I recommend it, and I'll put it on in the directory here, and you can follow it after this. But Asemic writing is this free graffiti expressive style mark making that flows out of you. And when I was looking at this painting, I was seeing something already here, which is the beginning of what I would call some really interesting Asemic writing. And so I can use chalk to say, what if I took this line that is brown on top of white, and what if I start taking it white on top of the brown? What if this white area moves over and expands and starts giving me shape to break this canvas up? So much to talk to you about, and I can't fit it all in this video, but I want to tell you there are 3 different ways you can start an abstract, and I'm going to do a special, my next recording is going to be talking about that. You can start with line, you can start with shape, you can start with texture. But line work is a great way to start breaking your painting up into interesting sections. Now, this is all done with chalk. So what's neat about this, if you get this cheap chalk, I'll also put this in the bio description. You can go and find this on Amazon. It's like, I think it was like $6 for this. But you can, the neat thing about it is, oh, I don't like this. Maybe I don't like this. You can just take it away. You can just take it away. And if you have a mister, I recommend having a bottle of water with you. You can just take it away very easily, and you can play with it. You can say, okay, I didn't like that one. What if I went out from here? What if I went out from here? See? White chalk. It's a great tool as you learn, as you start to want to experiment. So I sat here and I looked at this painting, and this is the irony of it. There's no right or wrong way. There's just the next step. And as you know, every step is going to take you in a different direction, in a different future for the painting. This is how a painting talks to you. This is how you have a conversation with a painting. I decided, even though this was really tempting to do Asemic work and pull this white space in over this, I decided I didn't want to do it. All right? I didn't. What I thought about when I looked at this painting is that it's all, the colors are all in the same field. They're all too similar. And I decided that I really would like to introduce another color. Now, let's talk about this. You could study color theory, or you could just let the canvas dry. And when it's dry, whether you use a heat gun or just set it aside and work on your next painting, you can put another color on top and they will not blend. This is what's so wonderful about acrylic. It's a little different with watercolor and oil, as you know. But acrylic, and which is why I love it, is it dries quickly. So now I could put any other color on here. Now, instinctually, I was leaning toward teal. I was feeling like I want to put some teal in here. I want this painting to have more vibrancy. Now, there are reasons that you might want to have a painting have all in the same family of color, but I have found that having a lot of contrasting colors is interesting. Now, I don't know where it's going to lead me. Do you hear that? I don't know where it's going to lead me. Now, the line work would lead me to an end very quickly, because I could see that when I did that Asemic line work, it was telling me where to go very quickly. But as we talked about in the first video, your job is not to rush to an end, right? Your job is not to finish. Your job is to extend this playful area of who knows what this is going to be as long as possible. I think that is why I have been able to discover different styles that I would call Chris Miller styles. I have several different looks. I'll see if I can post a couple of them in this video and you can see them. I have several different styles which come out of being playful and staying in this space of not knowing. See, if you rush to the end, if you rush to the solution, if you rush to the solution, then you're going down the same path. And your artwork is always going to look the same. And that's why I get frustrated when I see someone on Instagram rushing through and doing a painting really quickly and saying, look what I can do. Because what they're doing is they're following a pattern that they've built, a pattern of building a painting. They know what the background is, they know what the line work is, they know how to finish it. But that gets kind of boring. And isn't that why we have factories and industrial steel lines that can just mass produce things? But as a spiritual artist, oh, I used black instead of teal. Blah. As a spiritual artist, hold on a sec. As a spiritual artist, we want to expand this time and find new ways of expression. We want to expand the time and find new ways of expression. And so, let me see here. I've decided to show you that I'm not going to rush this painting to an end. I'm going to take some white and mix it in with a turquoise because I feel that blue would be really pretty. Now, there are some rules about this. Blue and orange are opposite on the color wheel, so they go great together. And maybe that's why I chose it, but I really chose it because it just felt good. And that's what I want to teach you. I want to teach you how to paint because it feels good. And I just thought, okay, I want to break this up. There's too much orange going on. And this is when you can use a bright color and just block out. You know, you can use gesso to do this, and I actually would recommend that. I'm going to tell you why too. Or you can just use a color. But because it's dry, it sits on top of the darker color, and it lets you block out. Now, I just decided that blue is a great complement, an opposite to the orange. It was something I felt instinctively, but there is a color theory behind it. Now, what you do, what I'm trying to teach you as a spiritual artist is to just feel something. Feel it. Feel it. Oh, what would happen if I mix a darker blue in? What if I don't blend the white in? What if I let some darks come in? Now, there is a point where this painting is going to get really, really like out there. I don't know where it's going to go. But once again, isn't that the fun part? Don't we want to be in that place of not knowing? Don't we want to see how can this turn into something interesting? And it might take weeks, or it might be something that comes to fruition. I can't control that. All I can do is be present and trust my instinct. Trust my instinct. And so I'm looking at this and I'm feeling green. I'm feeling, oh, I know, you're probably thinking, holy heck, but I'm feeling some green. And so I have some colors here. I have a variety of paints here, a variety of manufacturers, and I just think some bright green might really jazz in and add a different dimension to this. And so I'm going to show you that I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. Now, what I did is I'm using fluorescent green, okay? And I mixed it with a little bit of that blue that I had on my palette. So it picks up a little bit of a blue. So it has some blue in it. So it's not just pure green. But as you can see, I'm really just being sloppy and kind of mark making. This is mark making, and you can see this is the Asemic writing that's just coming out. Now, in my video where I talked to you about how to create and start paintings, I'm going to talk about the 3 different ways. This is using line work to build your structure. Every painting is grouped shapes that come together. And in this case, we're not together at all. But what I would like to tell you, I have noticed lately, and while teaching, that a lot of people love to paint big like me. Here's a tip. If you're painting big, you need to start increasing the size of your brush. So I oftentimes will see people, they learn on a small brush, right? And then they come into this and they're going, you need a bigger brush. So think about this. The larger your canvas gets, the bigger your brush gets. It doesn't mean you only use a big brush. You want differing line work. You want to use large, medium, and narrow brushes. So what I did is I have some of these larger brushes that I have bought, all kinds, with different widths. Okay? So, experiment with those as mark making tools because they will help you fill in areas quicker. This is just a pet peeve of mine. I like to always fill in white space of the canvas in the early stages of a painting, and I'll tell you why. Because that white will draw the eye when someone sees your final painting. And so I like to make sure that I have good coverage. Now, I might bring the white back. I might actually bring a white on top, let it dry, and bring a white back. But I don't want the canvas. Now, and I will tell you, I've gone to wonderful museums of some of the famous artists, and you can see the canvas or the paper coming through, and that's definitely a look, and it's definitely a choice, okay? So. But, and I will tell you one other tip that's from me. If you're using canvas and you have a side, don't be afraid in the early stages to paint the sides as well. Did you hear that? Now, you might come back and decide that you want the sides of your canvas to be black or white, but in Dallas, they love to have the artwork coming around the corner. And if you start, you need to pay attention to the edges. Pay attention to the edges as you go, or you're going to have a hard time matching them to the front. So that's a tip for you, is to paint the edges as you go, okay? So that's what I'm doing here. I'm filling in these edges. Now, like I said, what you should be realizing when you do an abstract is you want to create what's called story. You want to have layers of color, layers of history. It's just like you. Just like in your life, there's a story to you. What happened to you when you were a kid? How did you deal with your first relationship? How did you go to college? All those things that make you a richer, more interesting person. Same thing here. You want to have story so that you can actually scratch out and remove, well, this is a little too dry, but yeah, it's going down. You can remove some of these layers and see the colors coming from below. That's what makes a painting interesting, is those stories of color coming from below. Now this is certainly, it's what I'm feeling with this painting. Whoops, what I'm feeling with this painting is it's all broken up. It's all broken up. And that's kind of one of Chris's, little Chris likes to do that. He likes to break a painting up because then you can get to rebuild it. But you can see that there's a lot of different components going here. And you start, as an artist, you're going to start analyzing blocking and groups and where elements are. So you have large reds here, but now we have a lot more colors going on, and they're not blending into mud, but you also are enjoying the mud. You're also enjoying the mud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step back for a minute and just look at this painting. I'm going to step back and see what is my next move. Right now, I don't feel the impulse. I'm not sure what although I want to scratch it a little bit, I have to admit. I do want to scratch it, but I'm not feeling an impulse of what to do. But I am feeling that I need to step back and just look at it. See, this is what's so wonderful. I'm using a tool here, a chisel tool, and it's scraping down, and you actually are getting the color of the canvas coming down through. just like I did the other day, okay? Now, okay, I'm looking at this painting and it's all bright, bright colors. So what you have to do as an artist is you don't want every color on your canvas, in most cases, to be screaming out at you. You have to have some quiet moments. And so what I'm feeling here is that I need to get some grays in there, or I need to use gray to block it, to pull things back out, and to find shapes of interest, to isolate, as we talked about yesterday, to isolate areas of interest, make them bigger, and hide areas that don't work. So I'm going to use some gray, some pre-mixed gray. And play around with editing. This is where I'm going to pull stuff out, hide stuff, pull it back. Okay? Now what I'm doing here is I'm masking. Masking is a technique that you can use in art with white or gray or even black. It's a way, if you've been trained in photography, you understand what a mask is. It's a way to break out and break off a piece of your painting. And so what I like to do is I'm masking out areas that I think are less interesting, and I'm bringing to the foreground areas that I do. See, I love this green here, and I love how it's coming up into this orange, and it has a shape, almost an organic shape. So I'm lightly, and I'm using my brush, large brush, I think this is a 3-inch brush, on an angle to kind of cut it out a little bit, see? And I use these nice little gentle strokes to isolate areas. And then I see shapes that are just maybe smaller and odd, and I will tell you, making a painting, even an abstract, because a lot of times we see abstracts as just color being moved around on the painting, and I love those too. I do. But it's about shapes. How do you see shapes? How do you isolate shapes on the canvas to draw people's eye to certain elements? And when you do that, when you draw shapes, you have to have different sizes. These are so much the same size, I'm probably going to struggle with that a little bit. And over here, I'm trying to make smaller shapes that have more of an organic feel. And I'm using white, or in this case, this gray, to mask out areas of interest and create this organic flowing shape. Over here, as you can see my line work, This is one of the things that's kind of interesting that you don't see in today's artists. I have a background in, I ran an ad agency for 25 years, so I did graphic design. And if you're listening to this and you did graphic design, you know that we are taught to see things as shapes. This is how elements of me is co-creating in a painting. Because I see shapes, I'm gonna pull out the shapes in here. Whereas someone else that might have a fine art background, they might pull out figures. They might see an eye in a reclining nude. See, we all are unique in how our story is, the patterns of our lives and how we got to where we are. And so that's going to affect what we see and what we isolate in a painting. Now this big thick brush does help me isolate line work quickly. You can see how if I was using a small brush right now on this small canvas, you can see how frustrated I would be, right? Can you imagine? Now, a small brush is great for the end of the painting. When you're working on something large like this, you might need a small brush to isolate an area. You might want to draw something in there and isolate it. But when you're at this stage, we're working big. You start big and then you pull it down into the fine details. And what you do is I isolate areas of interest. I don't want to lose this red because it's the only red that's still dominant here. So I'm going to try to leave it for now. I'm just going to leave it. If you don't know what to do with an area of your painting, you leave it. Just leave it alone. Work on something you think, this engaged me because I saw these little shapes and I thought, oh, this feels really organic. And I like how there's some curve work going on in here. Now, what you're seeing is also you have to kind of put off the critical mind because this is not going to be anything like this at the end. You're not going to see these gray marks. This is just a tool that I'm using in the process. So I see here that maybe I could give a sense of a swoop, something large and dramatic. But I'm knowing that this is just a masking technique. I am masking to see, sort of like using that chalk, right? It's a little more permanent, but it's just like using that chalk. So I'm masking areas out and creating what I find interesting. Okay? Next lesson. When you work on a painting, you are going to be adding and subtracting. And I am just starting into the subtracting phase. I'm just now pulling out areas and saying, okay, I like this and this and this. That doesn't mean that these shapes will even be here at the end. This is that state where you're just present. You let time go, you stop using your mind, it just reacts to the painting, and you put down stuff on the painting, okay? So right now I have isolated areas that you can loosely see. I have a better eye. I've developed an eye at seeing where I want to go. I know that sometimes when I share this with someone, a friend, they'll go, I don't see it. And sometimes I'll get to this point right away where I go, oh, it's done. It's done, in the sense that I know where it's going. I still don't quite know where this is going. Although I'm thinking it has it has some potential here because it has some really neat in and out shapes. I'm not sure what to do here. And I still, as I told you, I'm uncommitted with this red area. How do I do it? Do I reflect a shape? I think I'm going to. I'm going to reflect this shape over here. So now I'm creating a kind of a balancing skill here. Although this is going to have to get bigger to balance that. Okay, now what I'm finding here is that this big brush is holding me back. It's holding me back because it has such a strong straight edge. And so now I have to start stepping down and going down to something that could be a little more curvaceous for me, that can bend and be responsive to what I'm doing. Because I'm getting it too, I don't want it to be squared, I want more curve. And so I've switched to this brush. Let's see if this might still not be small enough. See, I want more curve in here. See? So still big. Need to get smaller, need to get closer in. Switch down to an even tighter brush. Okay, so what I'm feeling now is that my colors are all really bright and I need contrast. I need contrast to help me define the shapes. I need to add line work. And there's several ways you can add line work into something like this. And let's talk about it. I could use what's called a neo color. Let me see where I put those. These are neo color pencils. And they leave a nice trail and they give me some line work, but they're very small. And so I'm not feeling real good about that because this is a big painting. I think it's about, 22 by 40 or something. It's a pretty large painting. And so I'm feeling like that won't be enough, but I want to add texture in here. I want to add some nice, wonderful texture. So I'm going to tell you something that I'll probably do a special show on at some point is I love using brayers. Brayers are wonderful tools. They're used in printmaking. Let me grab one. I have this box of brayers here and different sizes, different widths. And as you understand, you've listened to me talk, you understand why I want different widths because it's going to give me different line work. This could be a little too large for here, but what I'm doing is I'm actually going to destroy some of this a little bit. I'm going to overlay it. Now, I could use black, but I don't have to go that dark. So I could use this turquoise that I've been playing with as a dark color. Okay, so I take my brayer, having questions whether this is too thick. I want something a little thinner. This is a good size. And I'm gonna run it lightly, I don't know if you can see that, lightly through my ink. It's on my palette here. I'm gonna add a little black in there, just darken it a little bit. And it's gonna give me a nice little mess. And to test it, sometimes it's good to have a piece of paper nearby. You can test it a little bit. Do you see the kind of wonderful marks that a brayer does? So I'm going to add some detail here that it's going to feel like I'm destroying what I just isolated. But I didn't, because I still see it under there. But it's giving me some depth. This white, these colors without any sort of contrast from dark to light, it just doesn't have weight. You want to have areas of lightness and darkness. Your values are very important. And so what I do is I'm adding this as texture to the whole painting. I'm still keeping the red, right? I just have hidden it a little bit. And I'll tell you what I do with that. I'm going to bring it back somewhere else. You have to bring your colors back, okay? You know, it's funny. Sometimes with the painting, I like to take it as messy as I can to try to challenge myself. How can I take it back? How can I bring this back? And there is, and this is important to talk about, every time you paint, there's a curve. You start out in that flow state like we did the other day and you just hit it. Then you come back and you edit it. And then you edit it some more. And there's a place where you lose faith. This is really interesting. It's a metaphor for life. It's a spiritual lesson. There is a place where you lose faith that it's going to be what you want it to be. And so that is when you hold your intention. This will be a beautiful painting. It's going to be a beautiful painting. And even though I don't see any sign of it right now, well, I see a few signs because I've been doing this long enough, but I don't see many signs of it. I just hold my intention and I keep going. So I'm talking to every beginner out there. This happens to every single artist. There's a point where you go into the dark and you just keep walking. You just keep walking. And when you walk, something will happen. You know, you just keep walking. Does it make sense? So just remember that. Right now it's looking awful bleak, but that's just temporary and you will get through it. So, and if you get to the point where you're feeling really disgusted, I might be there now, you go and you work on another painting and then you come back. You walk and turn to another painting, or you just leave your studio. But I'm not quite there yet. I'm not quite yet ready to leave the studio, but I will, I might. So what I want to do is I want to add some oranges back in, okay? I feel, and this is something you should realize, as you layer your color, it's getting behind it. Right now when you look at it, the blue is in the front and the orange is in the back, and we want to confuse the viewer. I want them to see, I want them to go, which was the first layer of color? I want them to see that they're intermingling, that they're dancing. And so I'm going to try using the same roller with orange to just break it up a little bit more, okay? All right. And notice, when you add orange on top of another color, it gets dark here, it's brighter here, because green and orange make brown. But that's interesting. And as I come back, see, and then also notice that if you use the masking technique, and you're using a white or a gray, the color will sit right on top of it. So nothing is permanent in the painting world, nothing. So what I'm doing here is I want to show you that the mask actually is a mask. It masks what's beneath it, and it lets me sit a new color on top. It's kind of neat, right? It sits the new color on top. Now, do you see what's happening? Over here, the blue is still in the front. But over here, we've mixed it up. Now we've got orange way in the back, we've got orange in the front, we've got blue in the middle. We're going to dance by going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with color. That's what you do, it's a dance. It's a dance with yourself too. Because it's a dance of what we just talked about. It's a dance of belief, okay? All right, so I've taken some shapes back out, but don't worry, they're gonna come back. Now, what I'm gonna do, I am going to film me painting, and I need to just zone in a little bit. And I'm gonna listen to music. So I'm gonna leave the recording on, but I'm going to listen to music also, okay? So stay tuned. I'm going to show you. You can watch how I paint this, how I continue to go on, and I can actually listen to some music that inspires me. Okay? Okay, let's talk about where I'm at right now and a couple of things that are going through my mind that I want to share with you. First, as you can see, I'm using gray and white to mask out shapes because composition is very important to an abstract. It's all about the shapes and the feeling and the movement. And as you can see, I know it's still rough, and I'm hoping you can start seeing the shapes that I'm pulling out of this. It's going to look totally different because while I have committed to this kind of a shape here, I might come back and take a piece of it out later on. But I wanted to show you how you let the paint lead you. How do you let the paint lead you? So I've noticed here that there's these little white holes that somehow missed coverage along my long shape. And I'm thinking, that's kind of interesting. What if I just commit to those? Committing to them, make them a little larger and more pronounced so that I commit to these 3 hash marks in that shape. Now, I'm not even sure how I see the bottom of this shape going. I'm not sure. You can see I'm kind of struggling right here. And sometimes, and this is why painting is not something you want to sit down and you do in one session. It's something you kind of, it's a challenge, right? It's like a puzzle. It's like you sit down in front of the puzzle and you start looking at the pieces and you go, oh, I like these 3 dashes. I like those. And I'll tell you what, here's a little secret. Whenever you have an element like that, you want to repeat it somewhere else. So somewhere else in this painting, when I'm finished, there are going to be a series of dashes, whether it's up here or over here. Somehow, just to show you, I'm going to commit to that feeling of dash marks. You always want to use any sort of effect, I like 2 or 3 times in the painting. So if you see orange over here, I want to see orange over here. If I see red over here, I want to see some red over here. You want to move it around. And as you can see, we have greens, vibrant green here, but then there's a darker green here. We have a bright blue here, and then we have a dark blue here. We have red. So you don't want to have, for the most part, you can break every rule. You might want to have a strong color in just one area if you want to draw the person's eye there. They have proven that people look at color. They focus on color before anything else, even before composition. They focus on color. So when you draw an area that's just one color and you don't put it anywhere else, people will look there and you're communicating to them to look there. Now, here's a couple things that are going through my mind just to share with you. I have some very bold colors in here, and that's why I've introduced this gray to kind of pull it down. As we talked about earlier, you want to have some darker tones, some neutrals to ground it when you have so many bright colors. And I'm probably going to end up blending my gray with one of these colors to have a mixed neutral. Did you hear that? I'll probably take the teal or maybe the green, mix it with gray, and use sort of a down a toned down version of that color in here as well, just to ground it. I want it to be colorful and I want it to be exciting, but I don't want it to be glaring. I want it to be also soothing. So it's all about balance, right? Everything is about balance. And so I wanted to tell you one other thing here and share with my technique is that these, remember when we used the brayer earlier? Those bray marks, I have chosen to isolate them and leave them because they add texture and interest. Don't cover up all the mess. When something is messy, this orange coming through the green, actually that makes it more interesting. And we'll talk later. I can't finish this painting in one session, but we'll talk later on this painting. I'm going to take it one more step with you. But how you can actually build onto something you find. For example, how I just built onto these 3 hash marks, which I guess they're kind of hard to see, but trust me, I will start adding some lighter tones into my gray so that I have a lighter variety of gray that will pull up, because at the very end is when I add my highlights. It's one of my last steps. I use smaller brushes. But anyway, everybody has a different pattern. But I hope you can see that we have some shapes rolling about, and they're not all the same size. Okay? When you use shapes, you want to have a smaller one that's larger, one that's much larger, one that's hollow, one that's not hollow. It's all about variety, folks. Variety is the spice of life. So here's where we're at on this painting. I hope you learned some tricks from this. I will put some of these codes for 2 things. I will put the code for the hot air dryer so you can work faster if you want to, because you can see how I could dry this and move on to the next level. And there was another tool that I recommended that I will share with you. Perhaps the brayers. Brayers are a great way to add texture. And I'm going to do a whole special tutorial on brayers. But anyway, this look, as you can see, is going to go in the direction of some of my other layered looks. I call them part of a light series. And I thank you for following me along. And please follow The Spiritual Artist. Tell your friends to follow this channel. I have a podcast as well where I talk to artists. It's engaging conversations. But here on YouTube, you'll see tutorials with me talking about how to work with painting as well as with your own mindset. Talk to you soon. Thanks again. Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.